Yes.
So, I think you have I think you have some very good points in your presentation. And I do like the idea that it's about you being whoever was best for you. Is there a balance? Because I agree that you can't just be plain and old. I agree with that. But I think there's a lot between being just generic and being like something that's gonna just scare people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? What do you say is the good place where you can get between, say, being who you are, but not like what's the word I'm looking for? Not trying to be like don't come off as too
like, you mean sort of like not
creepy, for lack of a better term, cringy.
Maybe being sort of
creepy or
like
cringy.
Transgressive just for the sake of shocking.
Yeah.
The audience.
Yeah, because I mean we've had like people like Gigi Allen and
Sure.
Westboro Baptist Church, and they've done that, and I've heard this discussion with people like that. 'Cause I think it's an interesting thing. I mean, can you really make the argument Gigi did well for freedom if you're just going to use it as an excuse to do all that garbage?
Well, I'm not going to attack Gigi's art from the podium, but what I will say is that I know for me, just as I have the whole cis white male thing going on, but I also, I'm queer, I'm kinky, I'm formerly homeless, I'm a survivor of addiction. I know what it is to sort of walk through a world where the oppression that surrounds you is it puts on a layer of invisibility so that I know that it's there. I know I'm being held down, but it's hard to point my finger at it and call it out. And then it gaslights the shit out of you. And the predictable result of that is that you start to just kind of go into a caged animal, lashing out. So first, I come from a place of forgiveness in recognizing that if I see someone who's just kind of manifesting the angry, liberal or whatever stereotype it is, that there's a good reason for that. But also, when you are perceived as different or you're a minority, you have to work twice as hard to be considered half as good. So for me, I've grown into using it tactically. I'm wearing clothes that match my speech because it's part of my aesthetic. But you notice that I have a speech, I have my narrative down. I'm letting you see that I'm nervous in moments because I want you to see that. I want to be humanized by that. But I guess my point to your thing is that everyone has to decide whether they want to rise to the challenge of overcoming the omnipotent state. It's a giant, monstrous machine, and it never sleeps. So everyone has to figure out for themselves how hard they want to work to overcome it, and everyone has a different answer to that.
Thank you. And I want to say I respect exactly where you come from. I admire that where you came from was a place of addiction, and where you're very articulate with your pieces. And I agree with you in the idea that we should be accepting of people who are trans and come from oppressed communities we don't really reach out to enough. I just hope I don't want to scare them. It's we're just here to be eccentric for the sake of it.
Oh yeah. I'm eccentric because I can't help it.
Fair enough. I would. Thank you.
I would say that another way to put it is kind of playing to your strengths, and be like you said, being true to yourself, being true to your own message. But then it's also when you see a room full of people where all those people are standing next to each other in unity, that by itself is also a very effective message. And that's something that I took away with coming from the National Convention in New Orleans. How diverse the crew was when you're in that room and how unified we were on the fundamentals.
It feels really good. I always tell new volunteers, if you can possibly attend a national convention, you should, because it really does change. Those stereotypes that I read out, even there being a kernel of truth in it, or even if we can trace out rhetorically why that happened and understand it from an analytical space, when you get there and you're surrounded by the diversity that's there, it all just goes away and you realize how we have so much in common, and it feels so good to have that much in common. Any other questions? Yes?
For the economics, you said that you were not to speak about economics, but how do you feel then about the libertarian socialism?
So, depending which flavor of libertarian socialism, some libertarian socialists believe in trade, so free and open markets, and then some believe in a gift economy. And if you are farther right, often the definition of what counts as capitalism is, just when people trade stuff or when you give stuff to people. So I feel like a lot of times I think part of the power of bottom unity is that it takes us away from like the old left. I'm going to start waving my arms around, so thank you for that. The old parties benefit from getting us to hate each other and then maintaining that animosity, right? So when we join the libertarian movement, we kind of carry over, like, it takes a long time to overcome that conditioning, right? And a lot of times we replicate this, and even my own history demonstrates that it took years to kind of like completely fine with the concept of markets. And I actually was telling them earlier that mutualism gives you this sort of intellectual judo you can play because it's considered a lip-suck theory, but it's very it favors markets and is very comfortable with the language of markets and trade and standing up for that. So I think it makes a great sort of center point for us to discover rhetoric that doesn't alienate from either side. So we're finding a lot of success from leaning into that and sort of letting go of words that trigger people, if that makes sense. Did that get to where your question was going?
Yes. Thank you.
Did I turn you into a communist?
No, I just
Oh, yeah. Just kidding.
some people, of course, say that this term is an oxymoron, so that's why I wanted to get your take on it.
Sure. So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I mean, I see why people think that because the existing welfare state identifies itself as a form of socialism. And in fact, those two ideas are incompatible. So if I try to imagine how a welfare state, a compulsory, like centralized wealth can be libertarian, the answer is it can't. So that is an oxymoron. But the convenient thing is we're not actually saying that. So that's how that works. Yes, Mr.
I just want to address that a little bit, because that was going to be one of my points, is that one of the things that I talk about to people who don't understand, who have these stereotypes about libertarianism and what libertarians are, is that it is a spectrum, that is not a monolith of any one dogma. I mean, it really spans its own internal left and right dynamic. And the thing that unites all of these individuals who may have varying degrees of disagreements over particulars is that we all agree with the non-aggression principle. Number one, we believe that violence is null and void and not a legitimate thing unless in self-defense, and that they're anti-statists, that we are against the state, that we believe that the state itself is problematic, and that authoritarianism. So it is more of the left and the right are united in our anti-authoritarianism and our belief that we can be set free and that we're all better off without the government trying to ram it down our throats. And that's been one of the, it took me a long time to come to libertarianism because I did have those misconceptions, those misunderstandings, and I saw it as this sort of right-leaning